stay as we see, written big in block letters, more easily read. It still took me a while, but here's what that note said. I will love you each day like the first you were mine, but to change in their eyes, you must first change your mind. If you want new results, you can't accept what they say about your needs that make them think this box is okay. To put an eagle with cheeks does not mean he's to blame, but he must one day fly, son, or fail just the same. So keep your mind on your dreams and keep your eyes on that door. The inevitable victory can still be yours. To raise you up high, any risk I would take, but you, my dear child, you must plan this escape. Not sure what meaning that last line inferred, I returned to my crown with not much of a word. There I sat in a daze, the work I'd been working. Then I noticed strange sounds like free birds that were chirping. The next minute there, I spent disbelieving. No way could I see what my eyes were perceiving. A window had appeared where there'd been none before among these walls and locks and peepholes and doors. From where this thing came, I could hardly have guessed, but bright light and cool breeze had just captured my breath. And right outside the window, I heard sounds unknown, people cheering and laughing in loud microphones. There were announcers announcing on loudspeakers speaking, welcoming the champions that came from last weekend. They said, today is today, and last week was back then. On a day like this, folks, anyone could still win. Now, looking back, I'm pretty sure they didn't expect me to take those words, that excitement so personally. But there's no control over the words that we say. Once out of the mouth, they translate their own way. Every ear that can hear must interpret for self. So I picked up my note and started up the bookshelf. Then I slipped past the teacher and over the pane of the window before they could close it again. Then I shimmied down columns just right for escaping and rushed myself over where people were pacing. I arrived at this field, was amazed by the scene of these runners and jumpers on all types of teams. They were stretching and reaching after prepping for months to take the first challenge, to clear the high jump. And like antelope, they leaped. None knew fear or seemed hopeless, so I slipped into line, praying no one would notice. But someone did see through my thin veiled disguise. It might have been the boots or the scared look in my eyes. I beg, please let me try, sir. This looks like a blast, not like making those crowns from old popsicle trash. The judges hemmed and then hawed, then explained the plain truth. Your training, your build are not for this pursuit. They continued the line as the stars started starting. But from up in the bleachers, big voices began barking. Maybe he's lightning, just been bottled too long. You might think he's weak, but what if he is strong? Nobody would ever try as hard as he tried. And even if he falls down, he most likely won't die. From what I can guess were new fans of mine. And my mother, who must have been there the whole time, came demands I be given one shot at that bar, despite having no chance to show talent thus far. So they made me some room and they let me back in, assured there was no way I could actually win. But then the time came. I was finally on at the line with the silence so deafeningly long. In good humor, they played, began lowering the bar for this unknown, untested, not right superstar. But I whistled and waved, hey, you raise that right back. I can't break your records with a low jump like that. And so rolling their eyes and with fiendish sly grins, they quick raised my bar all the way up to 10. As they smiled and high-fived, I heard one of them say, do you think that boy is smart enough to just walk away? But they all looked surprised as in hiking boots clumping, I dashed for the mark they had set for my jumping. And with vision so clear I could hardly see through it, I leapt for that bar as if nothing were to it. There I floated. No, I sailed as the whole crowd stopped breathing, watching me attempt what they were not quite believing. Well, I didn't quite make it over. Seemed more truthful to say, see, I barely made half the distance that day. But no sooner flat on the mat, I began pumping my fist, making it clear to the crowd I was quite new to this. But what they could not have known from the big smile on my face was that 5 feet had just crushed my best jump to that day. It was 4 feet higher than the mark in third grade where they started to track me and how I behaved. It was 2 feet higher than in middle school buzzing. They said, soon you'll be dead or in jail like your cousins. This mark was the highest that had ever been set, and after trying, I knew I was not quite done yet. So I stopped my odd dancing in time to report there were kids lining up for some other great sport. But before I could make for the next crowded line, I was boxed and closed in by some old friends of mine. They were sent to track down the fugitive boy from room 8 for a quiet return to his class, to his place. Once back there, they tried to downplay the whole scene, suggesting that life, for me, was just a pipe dream. There are round pegs in your future. These square holes must be filled. It's good work for the hands and your particular skills. So I sat there a while, thinking maybe it's best that they saved me and brought me safe back to this desk. Then I looked and took note of all the names I could see of the others they had rescued and returned before me. There was Carlos and Derek, John Tilson's name twice, Rashida, Ramundo, and my long-lost friend Mike. So many more names I did not recognize, including one signed A. Lincoln since 1825. In the top right-hand corner, between all of those lines, there was just enough space left to make this seat mine. But before my eyes could dim back to the early blank state, I heard the words again echoed from the stands at that race, where my mother stood shouting, waving banners sky high. So what if you fall down, boy? You most likely won't die. A strange courage took hold, swept right over me. I grabbed a handful of crayons and big butcher sheets. Then I started to draft plans I had long feared to speak. I'd set marks for 1 hour, 1 day, then 1 week. And with those popsicle sticks, I began to build up a small room. When complete, was a full replica of this box, where some said I would live my life out, where none would see my lost face or would hear my mad shouts. And then I placed in that model where a brave looker might see one red X on the wall where that window must be. Then glancing around like I'd not done before, I spied keys to the locks on a chain by the door. And since all the teachers were busy passing more crayons and paste, I just left a note on their desk. Gone to find my next race. The race. Thank you all for letting me share that with you. It's a piece that I wrote, and I think that by now you can hear the trends in that poem that track with the story that you've been reading. This idea that sometimes children find themselves in places and they just need somebody to hold out the possibility of what they could be and keep holding that out. I call it the double vision, holding the present and the possible at the same time, to continue to loop them into a different vision or a scheme of what could be if they were brave enough, courageous enough to step into owning where they are right now and moving forward with purpose and with the courage to ask for the help they need. In the last section, this transition through Berea to my third shot, there were a lot of pieces that were hard for me. Obviously, there were life and death kind of hard, dealing with trying to hold myself, one as, you know, this new college student in a world that was so amazing and open, at the same time holding this allegiance, this alliance to my family, and particularly my brothers, who I felt responsibility for, being the oldest. And I know that you all encounter young people all the time who are stuck in that place, kind of the middle road, where they want to believe us when we tell them that there's another world out there, but there are all these ties to the world that they're in, at least 1 foot in, that keep telling them and reminding them that this is who you are and this is your place, for better or for worse. I don't think that my brother Sean ever meant it with disdain when he called me an egghead college boy. or when he told me that I was just pretending because people like us don't get to be great. That this isn't. I think that he wanted me to accept that so that then I wouldn't be disappointed by the world out there. And it made it easier, even as I communicate with him now, all these years later. And well, I hope it's not a spoiler for you all, but Derek and Sean are both serving life sentences. And I think that is one of the tragic things of my experience is being, and I probably just blew the book for everybody. I apologize. I don't know where folks are. They're like, what? I'm not reading anymore. But I think the through line and the struggle for me has always been trying to honor what I saw as this brotherhood that kept me alive through so many difficult times, and at the same time honor the idea of it, right, that was being held up to say, we're going through this because there's something better we deserve. And Dr. Lorraine Wilson, my mother, Alice Lovelace, Patty at the school, there were lots of folks who kept reminding me that this was here, but don't forget there, right? The present and the possible. And I think that as educators and champions, as hope dealers, our ability to hold present and possible at the same time with the young folks that we serve creates an amazing through line for them as they continue to struggle with the day-to-day and building themselves and this image and understanding of where they could eventually get to if they have the courage and the energy to keep in it. And I think that it really is that kind of support. So I'm going to take a deep breath, and I think that we're going to do another round of breakouts. This section had a few really interesting challenges for me. The biggest in my head over time has always been the conflict that I had with my professor at Berea, who sat me down and just gingerly explained to me, his process for wrecking me. And at that time, I was just so angry. And even I write about it some, but essentially, I've actually sat down and had conversations with him since then. I sat on a panel with him, which was kind of surreal because for so long he was my nemesis, and of course my wife Dreamer, she had him for every class he taught, and he was a favorite professor she's ever had. And so again, she and I are very different people. So, but in the conversation with him, I began to really understand that there was not animus toward me, right? That he was not looking to me specifically, but the idea of what I represented. I was a cocky young man who came in, who assumed and talked like he owned everything. And I say this because I know these are the young people you see every day. And so when they come in with all of that, most of that is the thing that allowed them to survive until they got into your presence. It is the self-talk that helped them walk through fire and believe that at least one more day they could get up. But what it comes out as is bravado and ego, and it's easy to see through it, really easy to pierce it once you recognize what it is. But very often when we pierce it with the intent of showing them that they really aren't that great, instead of understanding that that's a great foundation. Now, how do we convince them? And now they got to put some substance behind it. And then what I realized is that when I came into those classes, I was talking $1 million game with $5 in my pocket. And so there were people who weren't willing to deconstruct all of that ego to get to the young man inside who was wanting so desperately to be something else that he was willing to fake the whole world out until we could finally get there. And then so I want you to think about, in your own experience as educators, as hope dealers, some of those young men and women that you've encountered that you've had the opportunity to sit patient enough with, to actually see them, and then start to build. I'd like to hear what some of that patience looked like in you, where you found the patience to stay engaged with them through all of that trash that they throw out in front to kind of get you to get off the course, because they know how to do that. They know how to get people disinterested in them so they don't have to work hard. And then what the process was or is for you as you try to build relationships that allow them to finally, you know, grasp some of the things that they assume about themselves, or that they at least put out there. And so how do you stay connected with young people that push you away? And what are some of the strategies that have been effective for you in reaching and engaging them beyond that barrier that they put up? I think that was the question I was asking. And so if Katie, if we can shoot in the breakout sessions, I'd like you all to introduce yourselves again. Maybe a quick opening question: how are you doing? Tell your breakout group how you're doing, and one thing that you're excited about for this week, moving forward, and then step into the question, that conversation about engaging those hard-headed kids like me for their best interests in spite of themselves. Appreciate you all being here.
All right, I'm going to send everyone to their rooms now. It sounds like you're in trouble.
Go in your room. Don't come out till you've talked about this. I love it.
All right, here we go.
It's kind of like the Brady Bunch intro, and everybody's popping up in their screens. I love it. How's everybody doing? Great, great, great. I hope you'll have some good conversation. What I'd like to do, as now that I've figured out that every room has a number, I'm assuming you all know your number. So what I'll do is I'll just ask, starting at room 1 and work our way through, for someone to, whoever's been volunteered or voluntold, to share what your conversation was like and what some of the takeaways might have been, if that works. Start with room 1.
Yes, sir. Hello, my name is Heather Thomas. I was told, I guess, that I will be reporting back our conversation. What we talked about, it was, to begin with, how to connect with kids. And we talked, first of all, one of our principals explained that they tried to open up and show that they were not the only ones with problems, and that their peers had some of the same problems that they had as well. And he described that they used a program called the Discovery Program, and that it was very effective. And one of the other principals in our room said that they used it as well. And there's another program coming out called the Mindfulness Program, and that they were both very excited to see the differences between those two programs. And we also talked about the new normal, you know, and see what is going to happen as far as the reaction to the kids, you know, when we do go back into the classroom, and how they're going to react. And we also did talk about, you know, we need to work on the kids as a person first. We need to work on their emotional status before we worry about academics. Be mindful of breaking down who they are as individuals. And I talked about, you know, when I go into a classroom, you know, I have always tried to be a mothering figure to them. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, because some of my students have anger toward their mothers. And so I try to show them that there's other types of mothers that might not be that mother that they're angry toward. So I try to teach them care and respect. And we talked about strategies to take back that we learned from your book. We have learned that you have given us a different perspective or a lens, you know, that they may just be mad in general and not at us. And we have learned that empathy is a definite takeaway word that we are learning. And hope dealer is a powerful position, and we need to be mindful of that position if we are given it. and really what is normal. There are different definitions to what is normal, and maybe we don't know what their normal is. So our group is Jeffrey, Jim, Kyle, and Rhonda, and myself. So this is what we talked about in our session. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Room 2.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm going to talk for room 2 we were with Donna, Lisa, and Marcia. We talked a lot about just how important it is to be authentic, to be honest and real. I think so many of the students that we're working with have had, honestly, more life experiences in their short times than some of us have ever had, and have a lot more baggage, and they come with more. And so I think that just really being real and honest and building that relationship. The first group just talked about how important it is to build relationship, and we were talking about even outside of academics, taking some time to find interesting ways, like playing a game with them and talking through in the midst of that game, you're to kind of open doors for that. And then something we talked about a lot that really impacted all of us was how, Mr. Davis, how you were such a self-advocate. And I think that's something that all of us were kind of just discussing of how do you teach that? How do you help a child to dig deep and to be persistent in advocating for themselves and believing in themselves that they deserve it? And so those are kind of how our conversations were going. And I don't know that we had all the answers, but it was good conversation. And we're definitely very inspired by a lot of the experiences that you shared, just so that we kind of had a window into the different perspectives that are out there.
Thank you, Laura. And I'm taking some notes. Maybe I can answer some of those questions, or more conversation maybe. Room 3?
I don't think we had anyone in room 3 or 4 this
Okay.
week. We'll go to 5.
Hi, I'm Becky Brown. I actually wasn't on last week. I had an ARC meeting, so I'm so happy to be on here this week. I was with Vicki, Trish, and Marcia, and we had a great conversation. And, we were talking about how do you start building relationships with these students. And this is something I'm sure that we all know a lot about. And it's just building that respect, the trust, showing them how much we believe in them, like truly believe in them, not just saying the same thing that we said to the other student 2 hours early. In my experience, it really is talking to that student about them as an individual, saying specific things to them, not just blank statements all of the time and those kinds of things, just really honing in on that child. And then that's how you start to build those relationships. And then something else that we talked about was, Mr. Davis, you had the opportunity to go to EKU just right up the road, or UK or K-State, but you chose to keep going back to Berea. And we thought that that was pretty significant. And we didn't really understand why you kept going back. There had to be reasons. So that was kind of cool. We talked a lot about that. And then the courage that you had to go back and talk to people that, like the professor that was an obstacle for you. And so, how do we work with, oops, I just deleted myself. Okay. How do we talk with students about having difficult conversations? And I think that is so important, because oftentimes that's when we can put closure to a difficult situation, something we've gone through, or someone that's hurt us. If you have a conversation with them, you can put closure to it and move on. But man, does that take some courage. It takes some courage to have those conversations, especially if it's one-on-one. I think oftentimes, through email and texting, we are a little more courageous than we would be if we were in person. But I think that so much just comes from those individual in-person conversations. But you know, how do we get there? So, but that was a few things that we talked about. So,
Thank you, Becky. Some great questions and comments. I'll process those. I'll reflect and see if I can come up with some responses. I'm sure Maria was asking why I kept coming back too. So, what is with this guy? Room 6.
No one's in 6, but we've got some folks in 7.
7. We'd love to hear from you.
All right. Hello to everybody, and thanks for sharing. I really enjoyed listening to everybody sharing so far, and from last week to this week. It's been very enriching and very inspirational during this time. Our group, we were basically, all of us are not working directly with students in our current positions and in the last few years. So we kind of talked about things that reflected back on some of the things that we encountered when we were. So I shared about my last teaching experience and just some real practical things I shared. I just want to share out, and my group asked me to do so. One thing is I would, for students, I would listen through the anger and the hostility, and basically, and I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget anything, because I can talk really fast and I can forget a lot, okay? So basically, I worked in an environment that my students were very hostile and very verbally abusive, and to one another and also to the staff. And so being in that environment, for years, as an alternative educator. My first job was an alternative educator, and my last job was an alternative educator. I was definitely driven by my passion to teach and my relationship with my brother, who was an alternative education student before he was killed in gang violence in Indianapolis back in the 90s. So I've always had that passion and been connected and learned more about myself than anything. So I would listen through a lot of anger and hostility, and then I would wait to like listen, and I would literally hear what the student was saying. A lot of people thought that was very strange because I never stopped them. I just let them talk. I let them, holler, scream, fuss, cuss. And then I listened because they were trying to communicate something. And as a teacher, and I was a literature teacher, so I was like, okay, so I do a lot of, bell ringers. So here's one practical tool I would use. I heard a lot of it, so I would use something I heard from one of the outbreaks or arguments or fights or disagreements, whether it was in my room or the hallway, and I would put a question on the board the next morning for each one of my classes, and I would intentionally give them time to argue. I would say, you agree or disagree with this statement? And it would be something that I pulled from something they were talking about. And I would usually flip it to give a more positive spin on it, and then let them talk it through, let them hear themselves. And that had a great impact on the culture of that part of the building. I did that on a regular basis. And then also too, sometimes when a student, it was just a really difficult situation, and that child, usually was because of chronic trauma, that they were acting out that way. At the end, when they were done, I would ask them one question. I would say, okay, I heard you. Now, where do we go from here? And I don't know how many of you have worked in alternative education where you were in the trenches, but being in the trenches for 11 years like that, those two things, I got great results. And it not only impacted my classroom, it impacted the culture of where I was at the time. So I just shared out. They asked me to share, so I thought maybe I'll share a couple of those things. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Bettina. That was great. Good feedback. Room, I'm guessing now, 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in a room with Todd Davenport and Angie Austin. And the key thing that came up for the how do you engage the students that are being hardheads question, the key things that came up across all 3 of our experiences was persistence and consistency. Persistence in just making sure that you are the person that is reaching out to them. You are the person that is always asking how they're doing. The person that's always got the the level head, the even temper, keeping calm no matter what they do. They can cuss, scream, fight, throw things. You're the one that's calm. in the room because you're the adult. But not just the adult, but you're also the one that's setting the example. One of the experiences that I shared with them when we were talking about that, and this may be because I'm still somewhat inexperienced as a teacher. I had a student last semester who I was literally standing toe to toe with him one day because he would not settle down. He would not get focused. He was constantly being a distraction in the class, and he finally stood up and just came at me, and I literally stood toe to toe with him, and I just calmly said, I need you to sit down. I need you to get focused. I need us to get started on this lesson. And I just repeated that over and over until he finally did. And that's all I did, because in my head, I was thinking, I've had it up to here with this student. I am frustrated, but I did not let any of that show on my face or in my voice. And Angie and Todd both shared a little bit different experiences. When you get when they start getting personal with you, it's that's when you are getting close to them, getting vulnerable and starting to get something honest out of them. So that's where the persistence comes into play, I feel like.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Room 9. It says with a question mark.
All right. So my dear friend Peggy nominated me again, and glad to do it. Great group, great conversation. Kind of echoing what a lot of folks have already said. Consistency was out of everybody's mouth. I felt like being positive, being peaceful, being respectful in all your interactions, despite the behavior that you may or may not be seeing, despite the excuses you may or may not be seeing, but just making sure that you are modeling what you want to see long term in the kid all the time. One of my group members brought up, and I thought it was really good, about always being goal driven. And then once you kind of establish individualized goals with the kiddo, that they're very much a part of. I know a lot of places, oh, this, you got to do this. No, it's kind of like in a treatment team, like we do at the day treatments. It's a team driven goal with the kid, being reflective with the kid about their goals, and have them kind of make some decisions on if they're being successful or not. It's one thing for me to say, you're not doing it, you're not, but if the kid's the one that comes up with the light bulb and says, man, I really haven't been hitting my mark this week, I feel like there's a little more meaning in that. Also, engaging behaviors and picking your times right. A lot of our kids are functioning in lizard brain a lot of the time, and especially if they're engaged in kind of that cycle of anger where they're kind of up here or even on their way up. We have a choice. You got that split in the road where you can say something that's going to make them go, or you can say something hopefully that can bring them down and help them de-escalate quicker. Because really it's in the de-escalation that you can finally maybe speak some sense. And you can also maybe finally understand why they got triggered. If you use those times. And then we also talked about, if you do set the right goals behaviorally, for instance, a lot of times, you gotta have in the back of your head that you're going to see the behavior spike and get worse before it gets better, and you got to be okay with that. And remember that that's the process, because if it does spike, most likely you got the goal right. And you just got to be, consistent, courageous in that you're going to take it and be okay with it. Also, it just occurred to me too, in the middle of all this, you also got to make sure, like me as a principal, that I do a good job at helping kids help the teachers get self-care, because it does take a lot of internal emotional things whenever you're when you're in the middle of it. And we talk about a lot of times, use me as your tap out. If you're getting ready to be here, then before you get here, come see me, tap out. I'll come take over for a little bit, different face, reset, and then you can come back in when you brought yourself back to where you know we all need to be. So using our team, I think, is crucial in a lot of this. We just said teach the behavior you want, model the behavior you want, and then clearly show correction through the expectations you set. Don't make it a one-on-one kind of thing. Just make it a, hey, this is our culture. It's how we're going to be, instead of those one-on-ones. But everything's about restoration, right? Like, we're not about cracking on you. Our culture here at Owensboro Day Treatment is to inspire hope at all times. And we talk about that almost weekly in our meetings because we make it part of our agenda. So we want to make sure that that is kind of at the forefront. If we're going to be hope dealers, we have to actually live our vision and not just say, hey, that's our vision. We actually talk about it and think about it and say, self-reflect as a staff, did I do my best this week to get there? And then divert behavior. I thought was kind of one I just thought of here that we were thinking of with humor and also with interest in what they're interested in. Because a lot of times if a kid is starting to spike up, if you just start asking them questions about stuff they dig, they'll de-escalate quicker, and then you can have that real conversation after they talk about themselves for a while.
All right. Some great insight there. I like the tap out, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a tag team match, not individual bouts. Very good. Do we have a 10? Do we have a group 10?
Can group 11 go quick? I've got to step off to another admin Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock. Is there any way group 11 could jump ahead of 10, please?
Is that okay, group 10? Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Thank you very much. I'm Justin Hubbard. I'm the principal at Mayfield YDC, way over in Western Kentucky. And we talked about a lot of the same things everybody else hit on. Respect is a big thing with us, especially for me. And I kind of walk through my process when we get students. Anytime I get a new student in, I call them in my office and we just sit down and talk. And so, Mr. Davis, if you were a new student of mine, first thing I would tell you is, Mr. Davis, I'm always going to call you Mr. Davis. I'm never going to call you by your first name. That's a sign of respect. I'm giving you respect right off the bat in hopes that you return it at the beginning. And then as you get to know us, then it's true respect that you realize that we're here for you and doing what everything we can for you. And I've learned over the years that with that respect, as soon as you earn students in this population's respect, for the most part, they will do what you ask them to do. They may always be smiling when they do it, but for the most part, they know, they understand you, and they'll do it. There might be some grumbling stuff, but they'll do it. And the other thing what I talk to my kids about is, I don't go looking through your file for what you did wrong. All right, you're here. I can't change it. You can't change it. So I want to look at you as a student first, and not as a perpetrator, as a thief, or whatever. I don't want to look at you that way. I look at you as a student. I eventually learn what you did to be brought to me, but that's not what I'm looking at first. I'm looking at you as you, the student, and we go from there. And a lot of that was echoed through all of our conversation with the other. I know Mr. Nick was with us. He's in my facility as well. But Todd and Amanda both Ricky and Amanda both kind of echo the same sentiment. It is important for us to know what they did, especially if they have triggers and things like that. But that's not the guiding thing that I do before I look at you. I want to look at you as a student, and then we go from there and stuff. But we also have to realize that we're not going to reach every one of them, and that's okay. But we can try and stuff. Some people, the behaviors are just they've been too hurt through life to trust us or to give us the ability to trust us, and that's okay. But we still got to do our best by them each and every day. And yesterday was yesterday. We can't fix yesterday. Today is a new day, and let's go from there.
Very good. Well said. Thanks, sir. We'll see you next week. Group 10. They decide they don't want to do it now. Group 10.
We're here. I didn't know who was going to take the reins. I was in a group with Azurdi and Lucinda. A lot of times, first of all, I would like to get a copy of that poem. I'd like to have it printed and put on the wall in our facility, if that's possible.
I'll work with Katie. I'll get you all a copy.
Great, I appreciate it. You were talking about the kids that come in. We have kids that come in, and I was just writing it down, and you said this word, bravado. You know, that's the reason that they make it as far as to come to us. It's because they have that shell around them, and they rely on it. But our first thing to do is try to break it down. You know, so we're taking their security and trying to circumvent it, and it's some of them will let us do that, and some of us won't. We had a kid, I was telling my group, that passed away this week. He was a Senate Bill student, so we only had him for a short time, and he knew the number of days he had, and he didn't try to do any work. So his bravado stayed with him, as much as everyone in the building tried to get him to let down his guard. But he did go back to the community that he was from, and with the wrong results, and then we hate to see that. So how do we deal with students that don't want us to get inside? You know, it's really hard. There's students you like, and you build a relationship with them, and they learn to trust you, and you kind of trust them, and they know they can come to you. Our school has assigned mentors for our students, so we each have one person right now, because we don't have many kids, to guide and talk to if they need talking to. Of course, they also have their counselors who they should be talking to, but sometimes they won't. They'd rather talk to us. So we stand in there on the therapy part. I think our vocational staff, probably across the state, has the best ability to build the relationships with our kids, because they're not in a classroom per se. They're doing hands-on stuff, and kids let their guard down. I always said when my own kids started driving, you lost a connection, because you could drive them to dance or football or tumbling or whatever the heck it was, and they would tell you things without knowing they were telling you things. And so that's kind of what our vocational staff does. And ours in our building is great, and I'm sure everyone across the state is that way. But, you know, you just have to talk about them and treat them like adults. You know, the one lady says they set up jobs for them in the community for when they're leaving, and that we've had that happen. We've had students come back and say, look at me now, I'm getting married, I'm going to have a kid, I got this great job. And then we have the ones that go home and don't even report to the employer that we've lined up. So you can only give them so much, and then they have to take care of themselves. See if there's anything else here. Yeah, I think we would, you know, it's hard to get these kids to look at things that are going to happen to them when they go home. You know, we may send them out, and they may be on the right path. You know, she gave this example, you know, I might get an apartment with 5 of my friends, and we're all good, and that something may happen, someone may have a hard time, and that throws the whole group off. So she said that they play games with them, kind of a real life game of what if. You know, what if this happens, your car breaks down? What if this happens and somebody breaks their arm? You know, things like that. And the kids enjoy it because it is real world, and it is important to them. So it's kind of a play acting thing, I guess, and that helps them think ahead, which, you know, children don't always do. They can't see 15 or even 10 years down the road. They think everything is now. So I'm really enjoying this stuff every week, so I look forward to it.
Thank you, Judy. And that's what it was great, the whole problem solving, right? Troubleshooting. Is there a group 12? Okay. So we went a little bit over, but thank you all for your patience. I'm glad we could hear every group. I'm excited to get into the next section. Our reading for next week start at chapter 11, which is on page 95. Is that right? To end of chapter 15, so 134, page 95 to 133. All right? And I'm excited about seeing you all next week. Hope you have a great week. And hope is where we start and where we end. So I'm glad that you all are in this with us, all right? Thanks a lot, y'all. Have a great week. Bye-bye.